Hello, friends. Now, there's recently been an issue that has not gotten a lot of attention in American media, but is very big news in Asia. And that is the plan of Japan to dump water that was involved in the Fukushima nuclear disaster back into the ocean. Now, Japan, they say this is safe. However, we've heard very loud objections from South Korea, from China, and from Taiwan. So I decided to speak with three individuals about this topic, talk about why American media doesn't seem to be covering it, and if there are any real concerns about this planned dumping of nuclear waste water. The first person I spoke with was Paul Dorenzio, who is the news director of WBAI Radio Network in New York City. And he's also an expert on issues related to nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Welcome, Paul. How are you today?
How you doing, Caleb? Great to be here.
Great. So the reason we're talking today is there's been a controversial decision from the government of Japan to dump nuclear wastewater. Can you explain what exactly that's happening here? Can you give us the details?
Well, there's over 1 million tons of water that was used to cool the melted reactor core after the earthquake and tsunami caused several of the reactors to go offline and experience a disaster. That water could not be released into the environment, so it was kept on site in giant prefabricated tanks, and where it exists to this day. That water contains many radioactive elements that it picked up passing through the core of these melted reactor cores, and therefore could not be released into the environment. So it's being put into these tanks to be stored. It contains many, many very, very dangerous elements that occur within nuclear power plants, cesium, strontium, and others as well. Those are not to be released into the environment. The idea is to filter those particles out of the water and then release the water. That would take 30 years. And this process is expected to begin, I think, in 2023 is when they're saying it's going to begin. The problem is that even when you remove it, let's say you had a perfect filtering process and you removed all these elements that are radioactive, isotopes they're called, from the water, you would still have tritium. And tritium is an isotope of hydrogen, and technically you cannot remove tritium from water because it's a hydrogen isotope, so it becomes part of the H2O, the molecule that we call water, and therefore you have to dump it into the environment. There's no way to get rid of it. And this is a problem. Tritium pollution is a problem that has always plagued nuclear reactors. And usually the answer to it is, well, tritium is the problem with cesium and strontium and these other elements is that they are very chemically similar to calcium. So they tend to get right into your bones and other parts of your body that are not quickly reconstituted, and therefore become like little X-ray machines within your body, giving off deadly radiation. It might not seem deadly, it might seem like a small amount, but when it's constantly irritating your body, that's when you have damage to your DNA and to the cell operations that could lead down the line to cancers, and there's many cases of that, the most famous being in the 1920s, the radium girls who painted the glow-in-the-dark, undark radium paint onto watch faces. And later on in the army and in the military, they painted the control faces of cockpit controls that were used in fighter planes. You've heard of Murphy's Law, right? The idea of anything can go wrong, it can go wrong. So the last thing a fighter pilot in the World War II era wanted was a light bulb with a wire to a battery lighting their crucial dials and other instruments, because of course you can imagine just when you saw that fighter that you were going to dogfight with is when there would be a problem and the lights would go out and you would be then at a disadvantage. So the idea was, let's paint them with something that glows in the dark. And so they hired girls, teenagers, to do this job and paid really well. And then it got into the radium, which is similar to strontium and cesium in that it's similar. It goes right for their bone. It goes right. It makes the body thinks it's calcium, and it goes right into your bone. And then you're licking it, so it goes right into your jawbone. And then their jaws would literally get not only get cancer but just fall apart. It would, because it doesn't do the job of calcium. And that was one of the first industrial disasters in American history. And so many, just to give you some background, some idea of what happens when you ingest calcium loving elements into your body. When you get it into your body, it can cause these problems. So they're supposed to remove that stuff. Now, tritium being like water, the idea with how they excuse this, the industry, is that, well, it's only in your body for a very short time. Water doesn't stay around in your body that much. It doesn't get into your bones or other parts of your body. It doesn't become the actual structure of your body. You ingest it. It does this radioactive thing while it's passing through your gastrointestinal tract, through your kidneys, and then you excrete it, and it's gone. So therefore, tritium doesn't stay in your body very long. Therefore, the radiation exposure is limited, and many of these radiation exposures come from chronic exposure. Now, therefore, the feeling is that, well, if we take everything else out of it, the strontium, the cesium, the stuff that they find in children's teeth to this day from the nuclear testing of the Soviet Union and the United States and England and France blew up, had atmospheric nuclear, China as well, atmospheric nuclear testing went on from 1945 until 1963, something like that, 62, 63, when they passed the nuclear test ban treaty. You can still, they collected baby teeth and they found the strontium inside the baby teeth. And that's what actually prompted the nuclear test ban treaty, because the atmospheric radiation was detectable in the baby teeth of children that was collected by epidemiologists who are these really heroic doctors of that era who did these studies, and they found it out and they presented the evidence to the United Nations and to the world, and that shamed, it said, of course, I don't know if you can shame governments. Do they ever get shamed? That they were shamed into stopping above ground nuclear testing. And because this is what it was doing. So this is the potential problems you can have. Now, tritium is supposed to just go through your body and out again, and it has a shorter lifespan, half-life they call it, than these other ones. And after a few 12 years, it's 12 times 10, 120 years, it's all gone. It's half-life times 10 is how long something is radioactive. So radium is 1,600 year half-life, 16,000 years it's dangerous. So if you have a piece of radium, it's dangerous for 16,000 years. I don't have right in front of me, but I think tritium is 12 years. So times 10, 120 years, much less of an impact, although it's longer in our lifespan. So they say it's not a bad thing if tritium gets into the vast ocean of the Pacific. It'll be diluted. It's not that dangerous. Now, if you're going to ask me next question, what's the problem? Well, that father of the nuclear submarine and the nuclear navy, Admiral Rickover, and you can check me on this, but it's my belief he was once quoted as saying, as far as nuclear power is concerned, if nature has put a shield to protect us from the solar radiation out there, why in the heck would humanity want to artificially put more of that stuff on this side of the natural shield that protects us from 95% or 99% of all the cosmic rays that are out there? Why would we want to do something so crazy as to put it into the ocean or to make more of it on this side of the barrier? I think future people will laugh at us as a primitive time in history, as advanced as we think we are, for having done that.
Now, is there concern about, marine life? This could affect, fish. This could affect, the ecosystem of the ocean, potentially.
I haven't gotten to that far. I'm not a biologist,
Mhm.
And my understanding of tritium is that it passes through, and that radiation generally doesn't make other things radioactive, unless certain types like neutrons and other, does make other things radioactive. But it won't make the fish radioactive, but they will have it in their system. Now, I'm sure there's biologists who are going to tell me more about this, and I want to learn more about it. However, from my point of view, which is more political, socio-political, why would you once it's done right now, there's a lot of hesitancy to doing that. And in the United States, for example, Korea is opposed to this idea of Japan doing this. China opposed to this idea of doing it. Taiwan opposed to this idea of doing it. The United States State Department, oh, it's okay, let's do it.
Another individual I was able to have a conversation about this issue with was Randy Credico. Now, Randy Credico is a comedian. He's also got a long reputation as an activist opposing U.S. drug laws and the prison industrial complex and standing against war. He was a vocal, outspoken associate of Julian Assange. Here's what he had to say about the nuclear controversy.
So, folks, I'm here with comedian, activist, longtime voice for marijuana decriminalization and peace in the world, fighting for freedom of speech and freedom of the press, Randy Credico. It's really an honor to speak with you, Randy. How are you today?
I'm fine, and thank you for having me on. It's good to see you again. It's been a couple of years. The last few times you interviewed me, it was about Julian Assange. Let's not leave that one out. That's been my main struggle, which you mentioned, press freedom and the First Amendment. Of course, those causes I'm all connected to, and that's why I'm so happy and honored to be on this show with you today.
Sure. Well, thank you, Randy. Now, one of the things I wanted you to comment on was this situation with Japan dumping waste, nuclear waste, contaminated water into the ocean. What was your reaction when you first heard this story?
I thought it was some science fiction piece of work because, I mean, the irony that Japan would put out something as dangerous and toxic and deadly as nuclear waste is, they should be the last to do that. They have a history with nuclear weapons there. So, and the fallout. I mean, this is just insane. It's the most insane thing I've seen. I hope it's not true, and that this was something from the Onion. Of course, it's a very dangerous situation. It really is, and it's like here we're gonna put this out in the water, and it's gonna affect you people. It's like me putting a tab of cyanide in your drink. If you want that stuff, you want to build those reactors, and you want to deal with the waste. Put it in your own land. Don't spread it somewhere else. It's totally insane. It's beyond defying gravity. And I hope that they don't do that, because once it gets, not only should they be alarmed, but everybody should be alarmed. We've seen the fallout from the spread of the contaminated canisters that they put out in the ocean already, what it's done to marine life. I mean, this is their main source of food is marine life, Japan. Why would they put it out?
Now, anarchist playwright Brenton Langle, who is currently publishing comic books such as Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, has written plays that have been performed and won awards. Brenton Langle also wanted to give his perspective on the potential dangers associated with the dumping of nuclear waste water.
Anarchist playwright and comic book writer Brenton Langle. Brent, I was wondering if you could give me your thoughts about this recent controversy about Japan planning to dump the water contaminated from the Fukushima nuclear disaster into the ocean. Do you have any initial reactions?
Yeah, that sounds insane, first off. To tell you the truth, this is one of the there's been a big push for nuclear power, as the reality of global climate change has set in. And a lot of people have been pushing for more and more nuclear plants. But this right here is an example as to why I think nuclear can be part of an overall strategy, but it can't be the tip of the spear. And there's a lot of externalities that place the planet into a huge amount of danger. I mean, the US has had difficulty finding and storing nuclear waste, and now Japan wants to dump irradiated water into the ocean, which, you know, beyond like just environmental concerns, if you are a neighbor of Japan, this is a major worry.
Sure. I mean, we've heard Korea, South Korea speak up about this. China speak up. The government on Taiwan has spoken up about this. Why do you think they are voicing these concerns?
Well, I think they're probably concerned about fishing rights for one thing, because if you dump that amount of radioactive water like into the ocean, it's going to have an effect. And a lot of these cultures depend upon the sea for a decent amount of their food. So I think that's part of it. I think another part is simply just the sheer impact on the environment. I mean, nuclear waste, it is one of the most incredibly deadly substances on Earth, and it takes forever to disappear. So with Japan looking to dump it into the ocean because they want to meet their climate goals, which, by the way, very glad they're trying to meet their climate goals, it feels like they're passing on the problem because, you know, the ocean has traditionally been, except for areas very close to states, kind of a stateless territory. That it's something that all of us on the planet share, and all of us, have a obligation to steward and defend.
Why does it seem like many international voices have kind of given Japan a free pass on this? What's going on here?
Yeah, once you do it, because maybe, and don't, I'm sure you're going to quote me on this, and maybe they'll dodge a bullet on this tritium release because it's only 120 years. It's dangerous because the ocean is huge. But do you think that'll be the end of it? You will never hear the end of it. Oh, we did it then. Why don't we do it again? And these same tritium pools, they're called tritium pools, are underneath every nuclear reactor. They are nuclear reactors create tritium like crazy. It's the most common type of pollution that they have. And the argument is a main argument against nuclear power. And the main argument against those who criticize it is that it's only temporary. It's only 120 years. It's only a 12-year half-life. It's water. It just goes through your body so quickly. It won't be in there long enough to cause any problems. Do you think that'll be the end of that? All of a sudden, the United States has a law that says that all radiation is dangerous. There's no such thing as a safe level of radiation. That's in American law. So we're violating our own laws when it deals with other people. There is no safe level of radiation. One unlucky, highly energized particle or ray hitting the wrong place on the wrong piece of DNA in your 1,000,000,001 cells in your body could be the one that causes cancer. So that makes it's never going to be safe by American law, and they want to change that, the industry, but they've never been able to change it. Now, saying that, the U.S. government has allowed radiation to be put into the environment, saying it's unavoidable in certain circumstances. So often poisonous things are put into the environment in violation of the law for this or that or another reason that gives them a legal rationale to do it. Well, that's making all of us guinea pigs in their experiment.
That's going to they're killing themselves and they're killing everybody else by putting this out there. This is like I said, it's something that I would expect to read in the Onion magazine, that this is some kind of satire. But sadly, it isn't. And it really is dangerous. And everybody, the whole world should be alarmed by this.
Well, they're reassuring everybody it's safe. They claim that, they've got the radiation under control, the chemical that's involved, it can just go through your body. It's not going to cause us any problems. Do you trust them?
Look, no, of course not. They said that Fukushima, the reactor, was safe as well. So it wasn't. Look at the damage that it's done. Why would we trust them now with the fallout from the unsafe reactor at Fukushima? So no. Who is going to believe that? Why would I want to gamble? That's Russian roulette. I don't want to attack Russia here. I mean, so we got to come up with a different name for Russian roulette. Maybe it should be called Uganda roulette or soccer roulette. Why is it Russia roulette?
the argument Japan is making is they're saying, okay, we've gotten most of the bad radiation out, and the radiation that's left in is not really a threat. Do you buy that? Do you think that we can hang our hat on that?
Definitely not, to tell you the truth. I mean, again, the radiation, like when you're dealing with nuclear waste, the half-life on it is through the roof. You know, there are plenty of examples, you know, where we have had nuclear waste that it simply can't be disposed of. And Fukushima wasn't that long ago. So while they may be doing their best to bring that down, I still would say that it is I would say it's very premature for Japan to choose to dump this water. Like it's premature for them to choose to dump this water unilaterally.
Now, one issue that came up in the conversations I had with the 3 individuals I interviewed about the topic was the fact that it seemed like the leading voices of U.S. environmentalism have kind of dropped the ball when it comes to this planned dumping of nuclear waste. I asked them why the environmental movement in the United States is not all over this.
Let me ask you also, it seems like there have been few environmental and conservation voices that have spoken up about this, right? While, you know, we have heard from China, we've heard from Korea, we've heard from Taiwan, but why has the environmental movement kind of dropped the ball here? Why are they not stepping up?
I'm not 1,000% sure why, but I can postulate. My postulation is that the tritium, if right now they have, if you look at films, videos, and photographs of Fukushima Daiichi, the nuclear plant, the 6 plants, I think 3 of them, I'm not sure the exact number, which are totally melted down or a disaster, but they are holding now 1 million tons of water in tanks on their property. The United States does not allow nuclear waste from nuclear power plants to be taken off site. So if you go on nuclear power plants in the United States, even ones that are shut down, after everything is gone, they still have to, all the waste that was created has to be kept in special containers that are considered safe on property until they find a repository for the waste, and nobody wants the repository. The last place they wanted the repository was in Nevada, and the state of Nevada said, stop trucking that stuff into our state. There's places in Clive, Utah, they have a place. There's some places where they just have dumps where they put this stuff. There's some privately owned dumps. And now we're getting into a whole area of the politics of waste dumping. In the United States, for example, there are environmentalists who want the stuff taken out of their state. In Idaho, they want the stuff that was stored there for years taken out of their state and moved to a repository. Then there's people who are where the repositories would be located who say, don't bring that stuff into our state. So environmentalists, if you want, which are often really people in a state who are upset about something that happened or might happen in their state, are of way different minds of how to deal with this stuff, because basically it's NIMBY, not in my backyard. Now, are you looking for a pure environmentalist who looks at the entire world as one sort of Gaian environment and is not somebody who's part of a NIMBY organization that says don't bring it into my state, or take it out of my state and put it in somebody else's state? They took apart a nuclear reactor in Vermont. They're going to take apart one in New York State. There's another one in New Jersey. Where does the stuff that you have after you tear something down going to go? Where does the waste go? Where does the former bricks and mortar of that building, after you smash it down and put it into a pile, where do you leave it there? Do you take it to someplace else? That is very controversial.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. You're very knowledgeable about this topic. I know I had the right person to interview here. So thank you very much. And I'll be chopping this up and putting it together for YouTube. So
they don't have an easy answer. That goes back to Rickover, who said, don't make it in the first place because you're going to have a pain in the ass figuring out what to do with it. And it doesn't matter if it's safe. people say, oh, it's safe. It's not that bad. It goes through your body, blah, 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 blah. Well, great. Then put it in your community. No, you're not putting it in my community. And it's a bunch of people who aren't scientists it's very emotional. It's like Trump or any of these things. Everybody's like screaming and crying and saying, no, no, no. And when I talk to all the scientists, it's really regional. It's like the New York people say, yeah, take it. And the people out west where it would go are saying, no way, we don't want it anymore.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
You can't shut me up. And Japan is just this problem writ way large.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, it's writ large. I mean, the U.S. is saying it's okay, but the people in California are saying no, it's going to wash up on our shores. The people in Taiwan and Japan. What's funny is that the people in Japan are against this idea too, because being people who don't want to see TEPCO, a hated company in much of Japan, damage other people after they damage Japan, and then so we don't have really the Japanese people really, as far as I know, saying get rid of this. They're saying we created it. We have to deal with it. How are we going to deal with it? Which I think is great. I mean, and that there's such a powerful movement for justice that exists in Japan, and these other countries don't want to be experimental guinea pigs for it. They don't want it in their area. Whatever you say about it, and the TEPCO and the people in the United States who finance this thing and who are dreams of a future of nuclear power somehow in the future, nobody wants to build one near their communities, want to sort of get people to give up their fears of nuclear. And they claim it's nuclear. It's like a mental disease because of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, maybe that craziness isn't as crazy as it seems.
One would expect them to say something about this because they have been somewhat interested in Japan before. But, then again, also Greenpeace, they have also, there's been a number of weird things to happen with Greenpeace, with like former Greenpeace activists turned shills for the oil industry. So, I'm not saying anything against either of those groups. I simply don't know. But like I said, there have been issues with them in the past, or at least with Greenpeace.
Now, I want to be absolutely clear with my viewers that I am not opposed to nuclear power. I think nuclear power could be very important in moving against climate change. However, the issue of Japan dumping nuclear wastewater into the ocean is one that shouldn't be taken lightly. And watching environmental organizations and Western media drop the ball around this very serious issue is something I find to be quite disturbing for reasons that you just heard. I think all the viewers should be watching this issue very closely, paying attention to what Japan is doing and whether or not Japan proceeds, as it has announced it intends to do, with dumping nuclear waste. Thank you.